Following the succession of Akbar, we have Jahangir, Shah Jahan, Aurangzeb and later Mughals that we would discuss in this section. So let's begin with Jahangir. So Akbar's son Jahangir came to power. Now how Jahangir came to power is further interesting. Jahangir started a rebellion against his father Akbar. However, he could not succeed and Akbar ultimately forgave him, but later on this was very close to Akbar's resignation and therefore ultimately Jahangir came to power. So Akbar nominated Jahangir to power. As mentioned, Jahangir was the son of Akbar. He ruled from 1605 to 1627. His initial name was Prince Salim. He was also known as Nasiruddin Jahangir or the conqueror of the world. So the word Jahangir means the conqueror of the world. Now, the most important thing about him is that he continued the policies that his father had brought. He was highly liberal, secular by all means, gave Hindus and Muslims a equal place. He was a learned scholar and a man of virtues. So if we focus on his life, he was married to Noor Jahan. Noor Jahan was also known as Mehrunisa. Jahangir married Noor Jahan in 1611. Now, Noor Jahan was highly influential. She was originally a widow of Afghan noble Sher Afghan and later Jahangir married Noor Jahan, original name Mehrunisa. Ultimately, Noor Jahan became the virtual leader of the state or the province. The coins were issued in the name of Noor Jahan. Joint coins were issued in the name of Noor Jahan and Jahangir. Royal farmans, royal orders were issued in the name of Noor Jahan. In the memory of Noor Jahan, a tomb has been built which we would discuss further. Now, as we understood, she became the real queen or the real functionary behind the Mughal Empire. Jahangir was highly influenced by her developments and most of the matters, be it related to administration, be it related to government, fell in the hands of Noor Jahan. As the things progressed on, the most elder son of Jahangir started a revolt against Jahangir and Noor Jahan. Noor Jahan's influence started to fade soon after Jahangir died and therefore Noor Jahan at that point said that she is no more interested into the public life and wants to retire. So at that point, at the point of the death of Jahangir, Noor Jahan retired from the public life. Now, Jahangir had sons. The most important was the Prince Khusro and Prince Khurram. Prince Khurram later became Shah Jahan and Prince Khusro, one of the elder sons, what was important with him? Now, Prince Khusro raised a rebellion against Jahangir. He left Agra and started to occupy the regions of Lahore. He was later on chased by Jahangir, imprisoned and captured, but who gave Prince Khusro the shade was Guru Arjan Dev, the fifth Guru of Sikh community. And knowing this, Jahangir actually brought a death sentence for Guru Arjan Dev, considering the fact that he had given shelter to Prince Khusro and therefore was must be prosecuted. So those were the developments. The rebellion of Prince Khusro has been important historically when we focus on Jahangir. Now coming on to the areas occupied by Jahangir. Jahangir in 1614 occupied the region of Mewar. Now Jahangir led the campaign against Rana Amar Singh. Who was Rana Amar Singh? Yes. So Rana Amar Singh was the son of Rana Pratap of Mewar and he led a rebellion against Rana Amar Singh of Mewar. Rana was defeated in 1614, and later on the kingdom of Mewar remained loyal to the Mughal Empire. The next important development was in the Deccan area. The Deccan area, only the region of Ahmednagar. We are not focusing on the Deccan province of Bijapur and Golconda. That would come in light when we would discuss about Shah Jahan. So during the time of Jahangir, it was only the region of Ahmednagar. Now, what was very important in Ahmednagar, who was in power? Malik Ambar was in power and was an independent ruler of Ahmednagar during that time. In 1617, Khurram had a partial success against Malik Ambar, and few years later, Malik Ambar was able to declare himself again as an independent empire. So Deccan always remained a point of controversy. So at point of time, Jahangir against Prince Khurram, who was later Shah Jahan, was able to occupy or was able to succeed partially on the region of Ahmednagar with the victory over fort of Ahmednagar, and therefore Prince Khurram was known as Shah Jahan. But later on, as we said, Malik Ambar regained the power, and the region again got independent of the Mughal Empire. So the campaign has been important. The campaign led by Prince Khurram, the son of Jahangir, later known as Shah Jahan, has been important. Now, two important developments in the region of North. One was the region of Kangra. Now, in the region of Kangra, in 1622, what happened was Khurram went to the region of Kangra, and he was able to capture the fort of Kangra only within a period of 14 months. So after a 14 months of struggle, the fort was conquered. The mosque was built in the region of Kangra, and later on in the regions of Bengal and Awadh, the empire was established. However, the region of Kandahar had a different story. Kandahar, which was part of the empire till the reign of Akbar, was not in the hands during the time of Jahangir and was lost to the Persian rulers, the Shah of Persia, because Jahangir at that time wanted Prince Khurram, or later Shah Jahan, later called as Shah Jahan, to get and capture the region of Kandahar, but Prince Khurram refused to go to the region of Kandahar, and as a result, Kandahar was lost. Kandahar was a region till the time of Akbar. Very, very important to note, Kandahar was lost during the time of Jahangir. Now, Jahangir himself was known for the kind of fine sense of art and architecture. He was considered a very liberal ruler. He was highly concerned about the welfare of the people, established matrimonial relationship with Rajput princes, and the Rajput officials were brought into high positions in the Mughal administration. Also, he installed a very interesting phenomena, and this was known as chain of justice. Now, what is chain of justice? Chain of justice was very simple. Person could ring the chain and ask for justice, ask for any grievance to be resolved, and Jahangir would be there to address their queries. He followed a path of secularism. As mentioned, he was a supporter of art and development. The Shalimar Gardens at Lahore are a classic example, as you can see in this image. A blend of Indian and Persian style of architecture was seen. He wrote his autobiography, and his autobiography was known as Tuzuk-e-Jahangiri. We also saw Babur wrote his autobiography, which was Baburnama, and that was in Turkish language. Jahangir's autobiography was, since it is autobiography, it has to be written by himself. So Jahangir wrote his biography, or what we call as autobiography, in the name of Tuzuk-e-Jahangiri, and in his court were excellent painters. Ustad Mansoor, one of the painters. Then we have Raga Reis, Abul Hasan, Bishan Das, Manohar, Govardhan as some of the famous painters during the time of Jahangir. However, this concept of painting, miniature painting, declined during the time of Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb was not that interested in fine arts and painting per se, and this art slowly and gradually started to decline due to the lack of interest shown by Aurangzeb. Now, what kind of paintings? Definitely there were court scenes, painting scenes from the royal order, painting scenes of hunting, battle scenes. All of these were some of the common pictures that were represented in either miniature form or in a major painting. Now, what were the architectures that were built? Two famous architectures during the time of Jahangir besides the Shalimar Garden. Next is Akbar's Mausoleum or the tomb of Akbar at Sikandra or Agra. Now this tomb was built by Jahangir for his father, and the architecture of this tomb was inspired by whom? This architecture was inspired by the Buddhist viharas that existed in India. So the whole of the idea was with the Buddhist viharas that existed. The next important structure during his time was tomb of Itmadul Dawla. Now Itmadul Dawla was who? He was father of Noor Jahan, and Noor Jahan was the wife of Jahangir. So Itmadul Dawla was the father-in-law of Jahangir, and this tomb was designed and specifically built by Noor Jahan in memory of her father. As we know, Noor Jahan, when she was in position, she brought in lot of her family members at the post of high officials, and because of this a revolt broke within their children, and as a result there was a revolt which was brought by Prince Khusro, and this tomb of Itmadul Dawla depicts how Noor Jahan was actually bringing in her family members into the affairs. Now this whole building, the whole tomb has been a monumental structure designed with white marbles and a Petra dura, which is the mosaic work which is done along with semi-precious stones, as we have discussed in our class on Akbar, how we have seen the architecture developed. In the same form, this tomb also has the mosaic developments with semi-precious stones imbibed in it. The next is, during this time, English settlement came in. So 1618 was the time that first English trading settlement was established in India, and Jahangir gave concessions for the establishment of this first English trading settlement. If we focus on to the European settlements, if we go back, it was Vasco da Gama who came in 1498 and reached the port of Calicut. Portuguese continued to trade. However, closer to the time of Jahangir, we have witnessed that the relations with the Portuguese were not that good. The reason being, a lot of Portuguese pirates came in and they attacked the Mughal ships. The cargoes were destroyed, and therefore the relations between Portuguese and Mughal Empire started to diminish during the time of Jahangir. At the same time, England wanted to have good trade relations. So Captain Hawkins and Sir Thomas Roy, both of them came to India and they established the port, the trading settlement, and that was in 1618, and this was during the time of Jahangir that the first British trading settlement was established in India at Surat in Gujarat. So that was the kind of developments we have witnessed during the time of Jahangir. Major of the raids which were seen, or the annexations which were seen, were led by Prince Khurram. There was an internal revolt revolt by Prince Khusro, which we have separately dealt with, and how Kandahar was lost because Shah Jahan or Prince Khurram refused to move to Kandahar at that point of time. So those are some of the major developments about how Jahangir's life, his annexations and his interest for art and architecture were witnessed. As we saw, during the time of Jahangir, Prince Khosrow led a revolt against Jahangir, and Prince Khurram, later known as Shah Jahan, as we would understand about him in this section, was the one who led a revolt against his brothers. So, Prince Khurram led a revolt against his brothers and defeated them, and as a result came to throne. He was also the one who was able to have partial success in Ahmednagar, defeating Malik Ambar and won the Ahmednagar fort, and therefore he was known as Shah Jahan, meaning the ruler of the world. He was in power from 1628 to 1658. He was one of the kings who was known as the engineer king because of the marvels that he created. One of the 7 wonders in the world, Taj Mahal, was built by Shah Jahan, which we would understand in a while. Now, Shah Jahan's rule is very interesting. This is the period where minimum number of revolts and annexations was seen, a time of high peace and prosperity during the Mughal Empire. The state was rich, earned a lot of income, and Shah Jahan was one who issued the heaviest gold coins. Even these gold coins were given as gifts. Also, one of these gold coins is preserved in Switzerland as of now. But Shah Jahan also saw a decline due to his policies of pomp and show. As a result, there was huge sum of money which was invested into war, into buildings, into maintaining the expeditions, entertainment purpose, and therefore later periods saw the decline of Shah Jahan. Now, if we focus on the annexations, as we said, during the reign of Shah Jahan, more or less it was a peace and prosperity that prevailed. Despite of that, few uprisings were seen. One of the most important ones among those was Bundelkhand. In 1627, Raja Jujhar of Bundelkhand revolted. However, he was defeated. But he did not stop. He came back again in 1635 and started a revolt again. However, he was killed at that time. So, Bundelkhand was one of the centers that raised voices against the Shah Jahan, but was ultimately not able to survive. Shah Jahan at this point of time was planning movements towards the region of Central Asia. Considering that he has his lineage from Central Asia, from the Mongol ancestry, and even the Timur's exploits were taken into account, but he was not successful in moving towards the region of Central Asia. Kandahar, at the time Jahangir wanted him to go to Kandahar, he refused, as we have understood when we focused on to Jahangir, that how Jahangir wanted Prince Khurram, or now known as Shah Jahan, to actually capture the region of Kandahar, which was under the Akbar's rule, but it was occupied by Shah of Persia. So, during the time of Jahangir, Kandahar was lost. Kandahar again was secured by Shah Jahan later, but again in 1653, it was lost to a Persian ruler. Now, the next important development during the time of Shah Jahan were Portuguese relations. As we saw, the Portuguese relations started to decline during the time of Jahangir because Portuguese so far were having good trade relations, good concessions, but at this point of time, Portuguese pirates were moving in, which were destroying the ships of Mughals, the cargoes of Mughals, and as a result, the trade relations became troublesome. So, what happened during the time of Shah Jahan? During the time of Shah Jahan, Shah Jahan sent one of his generals to the region of Hooghly or Chinsuhar, and there the Portuguese settlement which was established in the region of Bengal was finally captured. So those are the developments that we have seen. The next was Deccan. The Deccan region itself was very interesting. During the time of Jahangir, as we have seen, partial success was seen in the region of Ahmednagar, and later on during the time of Shah Jahan, three of the regions were seen, which was Ahmednagar 1633, then we have the region of Golconda in 1656, before that Bijapur in 1636. So those were the three major areas. Now, two of the regions, Bijapur and Golconda, never subdued, but Aurangzeb was made the Subedar and he led the campaign in these of the states. Aurangzeb was who? Aurangzeb was the son of Shah Jahan. However, as we said, these two provinces, Bijapur and Golconda, never were under the Mughal Empire, but they, during the period of Shah Jahan, but they paid heavy tributes to Mughal Empire. This helped Mughal Empire increase the finances and reserves. So, the strength, the financial strength of the Mughal kingdom got a further boost because of the two kingdoms, Bijapur and Golconda, who were ready to pay heavy tributes to the Mughal Empire. And that time, Khan Jahan Lodi was the Subedar of Deccan and he revolted. Finally, he was killed, and Shah Jahan wanted that all the Deccan states should subdue, but Bijapur and Golconda did not subdue but were ready to pay heavy tributes. Very important to note. So, this was the story in the Deccan. Now, how was the Shah Jahan's end of life story? Now, Shah Jahan during his time established art and architectural marvels, but his later life was not that happy. He had four sons, Dara, Shuja, Murad and Aurangzeb. All of his four sons revolted against him, and it was Aurangzeb who defeated all of them and became the emperor in 1658. Aurangzeb imprisoned his father and killed two of his brothers. Later on, Shah Jahan died in captivity, and that was in 1666, 8 years after he was off the throne. In 1658, Aurangzeb came to throne, and since then Shah Jahan was in captivity. He lived in captivity for 8 years and had his last breath in 1666. Now, what were the architectural wonders during his time? The first of those is Taj Mahal. As we know, Taj Mahal was built in the memory of his wife, the wife of Shah Jahan, Mumtaz Mahal. Her another name was Azurmand Banu Begum. Now, what is so special about Taj Mahal? We all know it is one of the wonder monuments. Best builders, best architectures were involved. Nearly 28 precious stones were brought from across the globe to build in the monument of Taj Mahal. The monument is actually octagonal in shape with 4 minarets, as you can see at the 4 corners of the monument, and the whole structure also has an extensive garden. Also in Agra was Moti Masjid, which was also known as the Pearl Mosque, which was built by Shah Jahan. Now, where and what things were brought? So, the dome of architecture was the style which was taken from Turkey. The architecture of the tomb was taken from Iran or then Persia. The decorative motifs were brought from, the idea was brought from Shiraz, and Shiraz was again in Persia. The garden tomb idea was brought from Afghanistan. the water acting as mirror was the concept which was brought from Kashmir. So all of those were the concepts that were brought from different parts of the globe. It was not just the concept only, but also the semi-precious stones and the material which was brought from across the world to build this monumental structure Taj Mahal. How? We see that within Agra, bricks were made locally. Jasper was brought from Punjab, turquoise was brought from Tibet, jade and quartz was brought from China. Quartz is also known as crystal stone or sphatic. Blue sapphire was brought from Sri Lanka, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, carnelian from Arabia, red sandstone from Dholpur, and white marble, of course, from Makrana marbles in Rajasthan. Now these were the regions from where semi-precious stones were brought to build the monument of Taj Mahal. More than 1000 elephants were employed for construction of this structure. But this was not the only structure. It is interesting to note that after the death of his wife Mumtaz Mahal, Shah Jahan shifted his capital back from Agra to Delhi and renamed the region as Shah Jahanabad. Now Shah Jahanabad, the new capital, had two important buildings. One was the Red Fort, the other was the Jama Masjid. Red Fort has been historically important. It is also having a present day significance where we have the flag hosting ceremony every 15th of August at the Red Fort. Now, what were the main sections of Red Fort? Red Fort, some of the major sections were Diwan-e-Khas. Diwan-e-Khas was the hall of private audience. It was the most majestic structure, rectangular chamber with floral designs, and it was where the golden throne or the peacock throne or the Takht-e-Taus was kept, and Takht-e-Taus was the peacock throne which was kept at Diwan-e-Khas. The next was Diwan-e-Aam. Diwan-e-Aam was the hall of public audience, and this was the place where Shah Jahan used to listen to the complaints of the common people through the jharoka or the balcony where he was. The next is Rang Mahal, Moti Masjid, Nahar-e-Bisht. Nahar-e-Bisht is also known as Stream of Paradise. Now this Stream of Paradise is important because it was the continuous water running channel which was built through the imperial private apartments, and the idea was to keep this region cool when there is extreme heat in the regions of Delhi, and potentially we could say this acted as air conditioning system during that time. Also, the water for this Nahar-e-Bisht was brought from Yamuna through a tower that was erected. The next is Hayat Bakhsh Bagh. Hayat Bakhsh Bagh was built as a garden in the region of Red Fort. Now this garden, Hayat Bakhsh Bagh, is life bestowing garden. The next is Nakar Khana. Nakar Khana was known as the drum house, and it was a place where ceremonial music was played, and people were then brought with elephants, horses were left inside the fort. The next is two important gates at the Red Fort. One is the Delhi Gate, the other is the Lahori Gate. Delhi Gate faces towards the south, Lahori Gate faces towards the west, and the name is Lahori Gate because it faces towards Lahore in Pakistan. Also, Meena Bazar is one of the important rituals, we could say, that was started during the time of Humayun. The ladies of the noblemen or the harem were brought here, used to come here for purchase, and this was where most of the market was organized for around 5 to 8 days during the time of Navroz or the New Year festival which was celebrated. Also, as of now, Red Fort is a UNESCO heritage site. This site was built by Ustad Ahmed, and Ustad Ahmed called this as Qila-e Mubarak or the Blessed Fort. The construction started in 1639 and it lasted for 9 years. Finally, after 9 years, Red Fort was built. So Red Fort, again an important architectural marvel during the time of Shah Jahan after Taj Mahal. And the next is Jama Masjid. Jama Masjid is one of the largest mosques of India. It stands on a high-rise platform indicating the glory of Islam and has been decorated with precious stones, gems and even gold work. Shah Jahan, as we know, was again fond of painting similar to his father Jahangir. But this art declined with Aurangzeb, his son, who rose to power after a rebel among the 4 sons of Shah Jahan, as we have discussed. So this was understanding how Shah Jahan rose to power. His empire witnessed peace and prosperity, and lots of architectural marvels were seen during the time of Shah Jahan. So Aurangzeb rose to power after defeating his father Shah Jahan, and in the controversy there were 4 sons of Shah Jahan. So the 4 sons were Dara, Shuja, Murad and Aurangzeb, as we all know. And Aurangzeb became victorious by defeating his remaining 3 brothers. In the struggle, 2 of his brothers were killed and sent his father to captivity, and Shah Jahan remained later in captivity for next 8 years, where he finally died. Aurangzeb rose to power in the meanwhile in 1658. Now Aurangzeb's historical time has been important. He was also known as Alamgir, and he was the one who started to conquer south. Now, his whole lifespan could be bifurcated simply into 2 sections. One is the period from 1658 to 1681, and this was his conquest in the north of India. The second period is the period from 1681 to 1707, and this was the period in the South India, predominantly the Deccan area. One of the important things to note here was he focused highly in the Deccan area during his last 25 years of life, and as a result, his power in the north started to weaken. Despite of the fact that he was one of the very learned man, his policies were not that successful as have been quoted. If we talk about his life, he was one of the strict disciplinarian person, fond of playing veena. According to him, he was one of the orthodox Muslims from Sunni sect and believed that no wine music should be played in the court, and as a result he banned singing in the court. However, he allowed 2 things. He allowed the instrumental music to be played, and also Naubat, the royal band, was allowed. During his time, largest number of books on classical Indian music in Persian were written. As per one of the Islamic legends, it is believed that he was living a very simple life despite of the fact that his empire was an empire of huge wealth and goodness. His lifestyle was very simple. He believed that he is a messenger from God and his ideas should remain very simple, and all his earnings should be earned by his own deeds. So in his leisure time, he used to write copies of Quran by hand and also did embroidery on the prayer caps that were used, and these prayer caps were sold to the nobles of his court and other people around at a very reasonable price. The earning that he got by selling the prayer caps and writing the copies of Quran by hand was used to fulfill his basic needs and his basic lifestyle, and later whatever remained even from that earning was spent for the purpose of charity. So that was how Aurangzeb led his life, despite the fact that if we focus on his coming to power, we have seen how he had been ferocious in terms that he killed two of his brothers and sent his father to captivity. But despite of that, he was an adherent believer of his sect, and therefore he led a very simple lifestyle. But during the time of Aurangzeb, revolts around India started to rise. Now, what were they focusing on? First of all, the non-Muslims, the tax were revised, Jizya was reintroduced, and this increased the discontentment among the people. Also, the land tax which was collected from the farmers increased from 1/3 to half, and this made the common farmers and the agricultural laborers upset about it. Even during the time of flood or droughts, the farmers were not given support. So there was an internal revolt among the people that started. The revolt was also seen among the sects like Jat, Bundelas, Satnamis. Then we have the Sikhs, Marathas, Rajputs, and we would talk about Sikhs, Marathas and Rajputs again as we move further. But as we said, he lived a very simple life and had his own earning, and therefore he was also known as Zinda Peer. So his another name was Zinda Peer, very important to note. So those were some of the important things that we understand why, despite of his good beliefs, good policies that he wanted, there was unrest among the common people. The Zagirdari crisis also was growing during this time, which again created further troubles for Aurangzeb. Now coming on to the clashes with Sikhs, Marathas and Rajputs. We'll move on to those one by one. So let's first begin with the clash with Sikhs. Now, the ninth Guru of Sikh, who was Guru Tegh Bahadur, was the person who criticized the religious policies of Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb was not happy with this, and he arrested Guru Tegh Bahadur and martyred him at Chandni Chowk in Delhi. Already, the relations were very strained between Sikhs and the Mughal Empire after the execution of Guru Arjan Dev during the time of Jahangir, when the Prince Khusro's revolt took place, which we have covered in our section on Jahangir. Now, since the relations were not that good, or we could say the relations were strained with Sikhs, since the fifth Guru, Guru Arjan Dev, during the time till the ninth Guru, Guru Tegh Bahadur's arrest and his martyr, we have seen that the relations further deteriorated. Now, the son of Guru Tegh Bahadur, Guru Gobind Singh, became the 10th Guru. Now, he adopted his father's policy and organized Khalsa. Now, since Khalsa was organized by Guru Gobind Singh, open wars started between Sikhs and the Mughal armies. Aurangzeb and his successors, his later successors, the later Mughal successors after Aurangzeb, were relatively very weak and therefore had to face a hard time after death of Aurangzeb. So at that point, the power of Sikhs started to increase and Sikhs started to become a political power. So this was the relations with Sikhs. Coming on to Rajput. Now here again the story is far interesting. Four important persons that we would be discussing. The first is Raja Jai Singh. Now Raja Jai Singh and Raja Jaswant Singh were kept away from the court of Delhi. Now Raja Jai Singh was sent for a war with Shivaji, and finally he asked Shivaji after the Treaty of Purandar to come to Agra and have a settlement for the Maratha-Mughal rivalry. However, when Shivaji went there, Shivaji was insulted and they tried to arrest him, but somehow he escaped. This thing was a mark on Jai Singh considering that despite Jai Singh who was one of the loyal journals, he was suspected and insulted that because of him Shivaji was able to escape, and therefore relations with Raja Jai Singh started to deteriorate. Similarly, after the death of Raja Jaswant Singh in 1678, his son Raja Ajit Singh came to power. Now, when his son was coming to power, he was detained in Delhi and his estate of Marwar was annexed by Mughals. So Raja Ajit Singh's Marwar estate was annexed by Mughals. Knowing this, Durgadas Rathod, a brave Mughal, supported Raja Ajit Singh wholeheartedly, and at that point Rajputs from the state of Mewar, that is the region of Udaipur, the states of Marwar, that is the region of Jodhpur, and some other states of Rajput, some other regions of Rajput joined hand to have a war against Mughal, and this war continued for many further years. Later on, in 1681, Rana of Mewar, that is the region of Udaipur, signed a treaty with Aurangzeb, and as a result, Aurangzeb started to divert his forces towards south. However, Ajit Singh did not agree for any treaty. As a result, after the death of Aurangzeb, Ajit Singh rose to power and Marwar became an independent state, and Ajit Singh became the ruler of Marwar after the death of Aurangzeb. So we have seen the later Mughals were getting weak. Six rose to power. Here in the region of Rajputana, Rajputs rose to power, and coming south, we have the story with Marathas. So the conflict first of all started between Mughals and Marathas in the region of Bijapur, where both of them had the eyes, and both Aurangzeb and Marathas were trying to have control over Bijapur. At this time, Shivaji's power was rising. Now, Aurangzeb by all means was wholeheartedly determined to defeat Shivaji. But because of the rising power of Shivaji and Shivaji capturing many of the forts that were captured already by the Mughal army, there was a tough competition. So, Aurangzeb under him led one of his most loyal generals, Sheshta Khan, and Sheshta Khan and Shivaji had a fight. Now, Aurangzeb, when he sent Sheshta Khan to defeat Shivaji, he failed, and Shivaji was at that time able to capture the region of Surat. As Surat was captured, most of the forts created by Mughals were also seized by Shivaji. Now, what happened? Again, when Shivaji captured the region of Surat, Raja Jai Singh was sent to suppress, as we have already discussed this in the story with Rajputs. So Raja Jai Singh was sent to the region to have a fight with Shivaji. At this point, Shivaji failed and had to sign the Treaty of Purandar. So Treaty of Purandar becomes very, very important in 1665, where Shivaji lost, and Jai Singh was able to convince Shivaji to come to Agra to have a mutual dialogue between the Mughals and the Marathas. Now, when Jai Singh invited him to the court in Agra, when Shivaji reached Agra, rather than being entertained, he was insulted and arrested. Shivaji, by some means, was able to escape. Now, once Shivaji was able to escape, he gave this a strong thought that by all means Mughal army should be crushed, and he re-attacked the region of Surat, reoccupied the forts which were occupied by or which were lost under the Treaty of Purandar to Mughals. Now, why Shivaji was successful is again important. Shivaji was successful because of his technique of guerrilla warfare. Now, his technique of guerrilla warfare is important because he was well versed with the terrain. Now, since he was well versed with the terrain, hiding behind the terrain and attacking from behind became very easier and a kind of obvious thing for the team of Shivaji. So therefore, Marathas gave a tough time for Aurangzeb and predominantly the later Mughals who were there. So this was about the rise of the powers of 6 Rajputs and Marathas. Now, if we look into the detail of the empire, as you can see, the region marked in blue here is the region that was laid down by Akbar, and the region which is marked in the purple here is the region which was added solely by Aurangzeb. Now, Aurangzeb, as we can see, added whole of the South India. His last 25 years of his life he spent in Deccan area, conquering and annexing the regions of Bijapur and Golconda, which were not annexed till the time of Shah Jahan. So Bijapur got annexed in 1686 and Golconda was annexed in 1687, the very next year to Bijapur. Aurangzeb was not able to totally crushed the power of Marathas, and after a long struggle with Marathas, he finally lost his life in 1707 in Aurangabad, in present-day Maharashtra. His Deccan policies were more or less impossible to deal with, and this was one of the reasons that fastened the decline, we could say, of Mughal Empire. Now, you might wonder why this fastened the decline. Now, there were numerous reasons why the Mughal Empire declined. First was the policies of Aurangzeb. Under the policies of Aurangzeb, we can say he followed orthodox religious policies, reimposed Jizya, which was the tax on non-Muslims, and therefore brought in a lot of discontentment among the people. Also, there were numerous rebels, mainly the 6 Rajputs and Marathas, as we already discussed. Then his policy of Deccan annexation was important. Nearly 25 years he spent in the Deccan, and in this process he had to maintain a huge army, spend a lot of money on the army, and as a result his treasuries started to become empty. So empty treasuries are linked to his unsuccessful Deccan policies, and also he was slowly losing the control in the north because it was difficult to have a control over such a vast region as we have seen in the previous section. Also, his later successors were incompetent, were very weak, constantly fighting among themselves for getting a seat to power or a throne, and therefore had to face huge issues. During this time, we have also seen that there was rise of new powers. New powers, as we already understood, the independent states were growing, and also foreign invasions. Now, foreign invasions, 2 major invasions that we need to understand. One was Nadir Shah and the other was Ahmad Shah Abdali. What was the difference? Nadir Shah was the one who attacked the region in 1739, and Ahmad Shah was from 1747 to 1767. Now, Nadir Shah was the one who took away the Peacock throne at Red Fort, which was created for Shah Jahan during his tenure, and this along with Kohinoor diamond was taken to Iran. So Nadir Shah basically invaded, looted India. Then next was Ahmad Shah Abdali. Ahmad Shah Abdali gave a crushing defeat to Marathas during what? During the third battle of Panipat. So important to note, the third battle of Panipat was not fought with the Mughal Empire. So third battle of Panipat was fought between Ahmad Shah Abdali and the Maratha power, and Maratha could not regain the past glory ever after the third battle of Panipat that was held. So those are some of the major developments that we have seen during the Mughal period, and those we could say were some of the predominant reasons for the decline of Mughal Empire. Also, little later to it, we have seen that East India Company started to come to India, and we had Mughal power being replaced slowly and gradually by East India Company, which we would understand in our upcoming history lectures. So that was about how Aurangzeb's life, Aurangzeb's annexations and Aurangzeb's policies have been important. Despite being a well-read person, his ideas were not practical, and therefore he was not one of the very popular leaders who could keep his kingdom strong, and dissociation of the kingdom started after Aurangzeb. Now, the later Mughal rulers, it's very important to understand, were not that competent as we have read about Babur, Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, Aurangzeb. Every time a king died after Aurangzeb, there was a war. And after this war, there was a new person coming to succession. So what happened after Aurangzeb? Mausam or Bahadur Shah I rose to power. He remained from 1707 till 1712. After him, Jahandar Shah came to power. Now, Jahandar Shah was overthrown by his own nephew, Farrukh Siyar, and Farrukh Siyar became a puppet ruler in the hands of Sayyid brothers. Now, these Sayyid brothers, since they were the actual controllers of the kingdom, they brought Muhammad Shah to power in 1720. However, Muhammad Shah was able to overthrow these Sayyid brothers in 1748. Now, by this time, some of the rulers started to declare themselves as independent rulers. For example, we have Alivardi Khan, very, very important, from Bengal, who declared himself independent. Sadat Ali Khan again declared himself independent. He was from Awadh. The next is Nizam ul Mulk from Hyderabad again declared himself as an independent ruler. So these three regions, Bengal, Awadh and Hyderabad, became independent. In the north, we have already seen 6 rose to power. They became a political power. Here in the south, Marathas rose to power. In the west, Rajputs rose to power. So each of those grew independently. So Bengal, Awadh, Hyderabad, the region of Nizam, 6 Rajputs, Marathas were the sections that the country was divided. Since the later rulers after Aurangzeb were incompetent, were weak, the center became weak, and slowly as a result of center getting weak, there were independent rulers that started to flourish. And this was the reason of decline of the Mughal Empire, which later led the path for East India Company to rise with the declining power of Mughals in India.